Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome to the Catholic Mama, where you'll learn how to deepen and defend your faith, find comfort as we share the vocation of parenthood, and learn how to raise your children confidently Catholic. I'm your host, Christine Mooney Flynn. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Catholic Mama. Today I have a guest in the show. Her name is Leah Mohler. And Leah, I wound up finding Leah on Instagram, which it wasn't something I was not actually planning on being on Instagram when I first started blogging for the Catholic Mama, but my husband is much more knowledgeable in social media. And he said, I think that's a good place to be. And to me, it actually has been a great place because I've gotten to get a glimpse at all these great Catholic women who are out and about and talking about the faith. So, and one of those was Leah. So Leah, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself briefly to our listening audience.
Yes. So hi. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me on. It's my first podcast, so I'm kind of excited about that.
The second one would be to be the first. That's great.
I know.
Great people in.
Absolutely. So yes, I consider myself a lifestyle and faith blogger. I'm one of those that kind of started out more lifestyle, has turned more faith. My accounts, my social media kind of brand is Life as Leah Knows. So I have Instagram and a blog are pretty much my two main platforms where I talk about a lot, mainly faith-based again, a lot about my, conversion, my Protestant background, just because I get so many questions on that. Yeah, that's like the number one thing I get questions on. And also just as topics as they come up, like when the Met Gala topic came up, talking about that. And yeah, and a little bit about my life. So it was started as a therapeutic outlet for myself and has kind of grown into something that really a hobby, maybe more than a hobby at this point, that I have loved doing, kind of like you, that get to meet so many awesome Catholic women and people through it. It's been kind of incredible.
That's awesome. How long have you been doing the blog?
Not long, 5 months.
Oh, nice. Look at you go.
Yeah, that's what I say. It's kind of like rapidly, I think it's too soon to say like taken off, but taken off much more than I expected. Let's put it that way. It's something that I originally just was doing for myself, and apparently people started reading the stuff.
Well, you write well, so it's fun to read it. Do you have a writing background?
Well, kind of. So I actually have my master's. I have my undergrad in history, and my master's is in professional counseling. So with those degrees, I wrote a lot, obviously not creatively and not, theology or anything, but, particularly with my history undergrad, I mean, that's pretty much all you do is you read and you write.
Yeah. So
it's funny when all of that ended, you get so used to like years and years of writing, and then it just stops and I'm like, well, okay, I guess I don't need to write anymore, besides, work emails and things. And so that's kind of also this started as a way for me to like kind of get my writing bug out a little bit. And and it's so funny too, writing publicly, so different than turning something into like your professors.
I got my degree in anthropology. So I'm right there with you with research and writing and all that. And I've always been a writer. I started writing when I was in my early teens, and I write fiction mostly, but man, I'm years out from college and I still like researching things and coming up with theories. I'm like, and I realized like, I'm out of college now. Who am I going to give this thesis to? There's I'm not getting a grant for this one.
That's exactly how I feel all the time. I'm like, I have to put these thoughts out here. I've got this great thesis, like you were saying. I was like, I've got my points laid out perfectly. Okay, now what do I do with this? Like, no one else cares.
Instagram, Donna.
Yeah, apparently Instagram does.
It's really been fun you're great at photography and the writing is great. So it's a very engaging Instagram account and your blog is awesome too. So it's been a lot of fun, and clearly other people are seeing that because you've really gotten a lot of followers.
Oh, well, thank you.
So that's awesome. All right. So one of the things, we talking about was your background, and it was not Catholicism, correct?
Correct. It was not. So I grew up, this is going to be my kind of super fast version. I grew up in a non-denominational household. Whole family was, parents super involved in the church. Kind of fast forward to my 12, 13 years old, my parents actually divorced, and that kind of rocked as any kid's world would. I'm a classic millennial in that way. And so I kind of church just fell by the wayside. I wasn't necessarily like anti anything. I just didn't really care. And I was definitely self-proclaimed agnostic. I saw a lot of holes in my opinion, Christianity. And I was just like, there's probably something else out there, but I'm not really, I'm just not that concerned about it. I was too concerned about teenage things, obviously. So, as time went on, especially because you grew up in a family that is so faith-based, it was kind of like we started college and I kind of revamped my my relationship with the Lord, and so I went back to non-denominational, and that's when I became really, really invested, I should say, in Protestantism and non-denominational and theology and sola scriptura, which is what I really ascribe to. I was definitely pretty much, if you look at the spectrum of Christianity, in my opinion, you kind of have non-denominational on one side, you have Catholicism on the other. And I was as non-denominational as they come, as I like to say. It was sola scriptura, up, down, forwards, backwards, you name it. That is what I ascribe to, and only that. I met my husband, who met him in Europe, actually, on a trip in college. He was a cradle Catholic. It was one of those, when you first meet someone, you don't want to get into deep theological stuff. So I was just kind of like, oh, whatever, it's fine. And one thing led to another. I was pretty anti-Catholic, made some comments while we were dating. I'm surprised he's still with me. And, and so basically this is what makes it hard, is when people ask about my conversion and I'm open about it. But I don't have like this one moment. Like there wasn't like this, aha, it all makes sense to me now. I've heard conversion stories, where they walked up to a church and they just knew. That just wasn't me. And there was tons and tons of factors that ultimately led my decision to go to RCIA for the first time and even be open to listening to church teachings and church dogma, because I was just anti all of it. I remember one time I was literally like yelling at my boyfriend, now husband, in the car. I said, if the Pope jumps off a bridge, you would too, right? And I was just ticked. I mean, things like that all the time. So there was a bunch that led me to it, but RCIA and a lot of study and a lot of research is kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, I guess, if you will, that opened the door to Catholicism for me. So there's a lot more to that, but I would take up this whole podcast if I went into all of that.
Well, yes, I actually, I years ago, I dated a Catholic, and that was one of the reasons I broke up with him, because he wanted me to be Catholic. And there were quite a few other reasons, because if you really love somebody, I probably would have, been
yes.
able to listen. But I was like, no, peace.
Yeah.
You're not there to listen to it. And I really thought it was all a bunch of hokey nonsense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And what's kind of incredible, and this is like a whole other topic I could talk forever about. So my husband, I swear, is the most patient individual. We are opposites in every way. He embodies one thing I love about Catholicism, right, in the church, is that it is diverse and people bring so many different spirits to it, right? Whether it's the beauty of the churches, whether it's the theology. First of all, it all adds up and it all makes sense. My husband is he's not a theological person. He doesn't stay up late at night thinking about, sola scriptura and if that really made sense or not. I mean, he just never cared about any of that. He's been content with his faith with it. I, on the other hand, am much more logical when it comes to that kind of stuff. And so he never, ever, ever expected me to become Catholic. We got engaged under the pretense and went through premarital counseling that we would be a mixed faith marriage, if you will. I would be non-denominational, he'd be Catholic. Never in a million years did he think I would ever convert. And he was content with it. But he still went to mass every week, which frustrated the hell out of me, excuse my language, but it did. I was so mad. So he always would go faithfully, and he was fine with it. Like, he was fine being Catholic kind of on his own. And, I thought I was fine being non-denominational on my own. And there was no expectations there, which now that I am Catholic, I find it even more incredible, that patience that he had. And I think in so many ways, he embodies the church in a different way than I think I embody it. But I love that we're together because he reminds me of that a lot.
That's really interesting. I mean, even if you just look at the many, many saints over the years, I mean, they are so, so different, and they're all celebrated for their differences. So it is an interesting religion that we get to all be so unique and still bring something very common that brings us together, I should say.
Absolutely. And I'll read all these, like all of these books. Like, I'm literally actually going through and reading the entire catechism. And
nice, good.
And he makes fun of me so much. Like, we were at the pool in the summer and really brought the catechism to read at the pool. He's like
reading. Yeah,
he's like, some nice light catechism reading at the pool. Yeah. and for him, he's not into those kind of books. But, if there's like a book on a story of a saint in their life or things like that, he loves those. Where I'm like, the stories are cool, but I'm going to hit some Scott Hahn up real quick.
We watch a lot of Scott Hahn, and we were just actually listening to one of his audiobooks on our latest road trip.
Oh, I've never listened
to. The man's got a great voice to listen to. Very soothing.
Yeah, I've listened to him speak, but I've never listened to an audio book. I've always read a book and just heard him speak, but I like that idea.
Yeah. We listened to, we got a good amount through the Lamb's Supper, which was really interesting. At first, I thought it was just going to be talking about the Eucharist. I was like, okay, I don't know. I'm not sure if I know that it's very important, but I think I got a good handle on this. And then have you read that book?
I have. I actually read it when I was in RCA, so it's been a few years now. But...
Okay. Yeah, I didn't. I mean, it was as soon as he said that, the Book of Revelations, my ears perked up.
It's like, wait, what?
Yeah, like, whoa, yes, we'll listen to this. Plus his voice. Although I'm surprised it didn't lull me to a peaceful slumber while I was driving, because it is so.
Yeah. Well, that's like the fourth cup. I was like, I had no idea what on earth the fourth cup was. I was like, what was 1, 2, and 3? I have no idea what he's talking about. But I guess I'm going to read this just because I'm a Scott Hahn fan. And if you haven't read it, it's amazing. Things that I just never would have thought of. And it's incredible. I'm sure like in the Lamb's Supper, right, where he brings in things from all across the Bible. And you're like, oh my gosh, that all makes sense. I never would have added those all up together myself.
Yeah. You need somebody who's been doing this for decades and is super smart. I just finished reading Behold Your Mother by Tim Staples, and he's, I've heard him speak, and he's got a nice Southern accent, so it sounds like home to me. But I can hear that it comes across really well in his writing style. So that was a lot of fun to read. But he was coming up with, it's just so fascinating to me how and brilliant, really. I mean, only God could be this intelligent to have Jesus fulfill these things that were said in Scripture. I mean, it's incredible. And then other people to actually pick up on it and make those connections.
Oh yeah, I love Behold Your Mother. I just finished rereading it, and it is so full of information. Like, my brain can only take so much of it. I'm like, okay, I have to take a break from this, because that was so chock full of, every paragraph is full of all these different revelations that I've never thought of before.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
I know. I read through it. I just finished it up 2 mornings ago. Now I'm on Theology of the Body. So I actually, how long ago was your conversion? When did you go through the RCIA process?
Yeah, so 2016. So a little over 2 years ago.
Oh, okay. You got 2 years on me. So yeah, I'm just really reading, because before this I would have been like, oh, I'm good.
Right.
There's probably nothing. We're all trapped in nothingness. Life's great.
Yeah. Well, and it's amazing too, and you probably get this, and it's something I always try and explain to cradle Catholics a lot that they just may not understand, is well, first of all, an example, I wouldn't know about any of these feast days if it wasn't for social media. And apparently everyone keeps these on their calendars. I'm like, what saint? And everyone's like, oh, this is my, these are my top 20 favorite saints. I'm like, gosh, I know like 5. Like, and it's things that cradle Catholics, I think, grow up with, and just different lingo that they use. And it all the time, like, I'm trying to think of some that I see and hear people use that I literally will have to Google. And like, you've had a lifetime of this, and I have fit it in within like 2 years. And, and the church is 2,000 years old, and I'm trying to fit all that knowledge into my head. And sometimes, even for someone who I like to consider myself well-read and well-versed in like church teaching and church dogmas, there's a lot of just like little like nuances of living the faith that I'm playing catch up on extremely. And I'll get, some cradle Catholics will message me like, did you hear about this or this or this? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what they're talking about. I'm going to go have to look at what they're talking about.
Even my dad, who is away from the faith now, I mean, he hasn't, I would imagine one of the last times he went to mass would have been his own wedding, which was 41 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But even still, he'll remember like, oh, he'll just say something random like, oh, did you know today is the feast of such and such? Like, how do you know this? It's been you're almost 70. How do you know? But he remembers. I mean, it's just so he was just steeped in it for 25 years.
Man, it's true though. And, there's things that I'll still, again, have to ask my husband or ask one of his family members. I'm like, wait, what's that? I have no idea what that is.
That's good. I mean, I just have to look it up online, because my husband grew up he was an altar boy when he was, I guess, 11 or 12. And then his parents got divorced. And so going to church and then sports on Sundays. So suddenly church just wasn't that important to them anymore. And so he stopped going, and then slowly devolved into atheism. And I was just right about there too. And then the two of us just combined was just a sad mess to both be atheists. It was very difficult. So yeah, we're both just, and we, our families are Catholic-ish, like they were raised that way, and they might still go to mass, but they're not as passionate or invested. It doesn't feel like. Right.
So you guys became atheists kind of together then, and then came back together?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think. I remember he had said something about, I think he was going through some virtual reality type, like Matrix-y, like that could be the universe, the Matrix type phase. And I remember feeling really like sick to my stomach, thinking that this was all illusion. But he was reading, and he was very compelling, and he's like, the way he was talking, I thought, okay, maybe he does know. I'm not researching this stuff. I leave this up to him, because I don't know. I just wasn't interested in it at the time.
Right.
So I was like, okay. And then he kept what seemed to me such compelling arguments, and I was already losing my faith anyway. Just over time, I don't know. I just slowly started to feel there was nothing. It just whatever that flow was, and now I realize, it was me shutting out God, not the other way around.
You're right.
Yeah. So yeah, we both wound up being atheists, but we both at the same time kept saying, I feel like we got to get something right with our souls, even though we didn't even believe in souls. I'm not sure. We're just very inconsistent, I guess.
No. It's so funny that you bring up feeling, because this is something. So I have a lot of, my demographic of my following is generally, either young adults or just young Catholics. And I have gotten the question, if I get a question more than like 5 or 6 times, I consider it a trend. And one of the questions that I've gotten that has kind of trended is concern that they don't feel anything sometimes when they go to church. They see everyone else like quote unquote feeling it, and they don't. Like they must be doing something wrong, or it makes them doubt. And this was something that had always bothered me at my past church, so my Protestant church, because I'm like, I can fake like I'm feeling it. So like non-denominational churches, let's be clear, it's like set up for feeling. Mm-hmm. They put the lights down low. They've got the right music set. They are zooming in on people with their eyes closed and their hands raised. It is like literally perfectly set to elicit an emotional response from you, right? The Catholic Church doesn't necessarily give that. So when I talk to a lot of these young Catholics who are like, I go to these non-denominational services, and I feel it there, but I don't feel it here. And I'm like, okay, well, we need to differentiate a feeling that's being elicited from, just your external senses versus feeling God. And I remember I struggled with this when I was coming into the church, and I was, getting ready to take my first communion. And, you know, they get all these people who come up and tell these amazing stories about their first time taking communion and how, you know, magical it was and all these different things. And I'm sitting there like, I just don't feel like I'm an overly emotional person. And I'm like, what if that doesn't happen to me? And I went and talked to my sponsor, who's like one of the most brilliant women ever. And I was like, I kind of like put out that all these people are talking about this. I was like, you know, the church to me is logical and it makes sense. And I love that. But now we're getting all emotional and I don't like it. And what if that doesn't, like, I hope it does, but what if it doesn't? And she was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that that's the tone that we set. She goes, because here's the truth. She goes, even if you don't feel, quote unquote, feel something, she goes, doesn't make it any less true. And it was just something that sounds so silly, like, well, no doy, but it didn't seem like that to me, because everything up into that point, it's always been about that emotional relationship experience versus just like true is true is true is true. Whether or not you believe it, whether or not you feel it, it is true. And so I went in with a much bigger confidence, like, it doesn't matter. You know, I believe it's true and I know it's true. And whether or not my emotional response from it, it still is what it is. And so that was kind of a big thing that clicked. And I feel like people don't really talk about that. I don't feel like. And the amount of questions I've gotten from young girls makes me think that it's something I've liked to talk about. And I have talked about with many of them.
That's awesome. Yeah. We my husband and I have talked that, you know, even if you get, you know, your older brother is teaching you arithmetic and he beats the crap out of you to have you learn 2 + 2 = 4. Even if you don't like the way you learned it, it doesn't make it any less true. It's right. Same with the church. Even like my dad pre-Vatican II probably acted up and the nuns may have rapped him on the knuckles a lot.
Yes.
That's left him with a sour feeling about the faith, but that doesn't make the faith any less true.
Oh, and that's exactly right. It's all these, and because I think a lot of that generation, like my dad's generation, your dad's generation, you hear that all the time. If you listen to people's stories, particularly from that generation who have all left the church, it is all about a bad experience they had with people within the church. 99% of the ones I've read or heard about. Doesn't mean that obviously there's exceptions to this, but like you said, it's an understanding of what the truth is and what the church is and what it isn't. And I think that sometimes gets lost in translation because for many reasons that could be a totally different topic, but
yeah, I don't know if we really connect the words faith and truth. You hear more like faith and emotion, faith and feelings.
Yes.
But you don't really hear that connected. So that would make sense to me, especially if, you know, younger generation probably wouldn't have. I don't know if the truth or, you know, scientific reasoning and thought are really that discussed or taught nowadays anyway.
No.
But younger people probably wouldn't even think that would be connected.
No. And to me, that's the biggest, you know, the church isn't perfect too. And I've learned, obviously I didn't grow up in the faith. So this is all just conjecture from those who have grown up in it. So few of them, I think, have a really good theological basis and understanding of what it is that they believe. Like, I think I know a lot more than they do. Yeah. And I've only been really learning about it 2 years. Like I can tell you, I know a lot more than my husband does. Again, there's also, the motivation there. He's just not really that interested in it. But generally speaking, they're like, how are you so confident? I was like, well, because I know what I believe and why I believe it.
Yeah, the why is very important.
Yes, know what and know the why. Because here's another thing too. So when it comes to Protestant denominations, sola scriptura, and this is where it's so hard to have quote unquote theological, I don't want to say arguments, but discussions. It's really hard because it all comes down to sola scriptura. Sola scriptura apologetics takes literally 3 minutes to explain. And this is not meant to be a knock. It's just the truth. It's a relatively simplistic theological platform. I understood theological forwards and backwards, and I didn't really study theology, but I knew it well. And the thing is, all you need is the Bible and verses, and it's like your trump card, as I like to say. Like, you can't say anything against it because they'll just throw a verse at you, say this is what it means.
Yeah.
You can't say anything else. So you can't really have these discussions because you don't even have the same theological basis in which to talk about. If you can't even agree on like what the church is, you can't talk about all these other topics that fall from it, such as Mary, such as confession, the Assumption of Mary, all these different things. You can't talk about those as individualistic things because they stem from the root of understanding sola scriptura. And so many cradle Catholics, in my experience anyway, they don't get that. They miss that. And I try and explain the difference there and why you have to talk about that before you can talk about anything else, because you're not even talking about the same thing.
That's you can't really argue or debate something if you don't have that common ground.
No. And, and Catholic apologetics, there's a reason why there's people like Scott Hahn. It is so vast and it is so deep. And as you know, I'm sure through all the books that you've read, you think about all of that. I can't give you a concise statement and sum it up.
Oh yeah, no, it's so nuanced. It's funny, last year at some point, I'm a big reader, but I was having a hard time finding anything that was really, I felt like it was really worth my time because I have limited time. I have 3 kids under the age of 4 or 5. So
that'll do it.
Yeah, I'm just a little busy and I didn't want to read anything that, thrillers are fine, that I have sweet little babies. I don't really want to read about violence too much. I don't really know what to read. Have I exhausted everything I feel like reading? And it's funny. I was just telling my husband that now I have a lifetime of reading, and I will never exhaust all of it. Nope. I'm playing catch up on 2,000 years of church writings, and these are people who are far more intelligent, and they've written a lot.
Yes.
So I got time. Yes. I got lots of stuff to read.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm going through St. Thomas Aquinas's shorter Summa right now.
Oh.
And yeah, that is going to keep me busy for maybe months because I can only read it a couple paragraphs, pages at a time, but I'm getting there. But there is. Oh my gosh. Yes. And it just used to reading theological writings. It's so rich and it's so vast. And so it's just, you can't have like one conversation with someone. That's why RCIA is as long as it is.
Right. Yeah.
It could be a lot longer.
Yeah. Actually, I'm excited. I realized that I was Catholic probably just January of this year. It was probably January. And I hopped into the RCIA and they told me like, okay, you're not going to be able to get baptized this year. It won't work out. I said, okay. But then the stars aligned. I think I was doing enough studies. They realized that I was really into this. So I was able to get baptized. But for some reason, I'm not getting confirmed until next Pentecost. So I get to go through the process again. I'm actually really excited to go through with a new group. And especially because I've read so much more now. I've required readings for the entire year for them. And
you're going to teach it.
Yeah, I could. But I'm chomping at the bit because my husband just got confirmed this year. So it's so cool to see that. And I'm excited to get to go back down to our basilica in Philadelphia and do this again for me.
That's awesome. Did they, so that's funny. So did he start ICA before you then? Is that why he was able to get confirmed this year?
No, I don't know why actually he was able to get confirmed this year.
He pulled some strings.
He pulled some strings. The sister who's in charge of all this, maybe she liked him better. He actually got to go to a couple before I did.
Okay. I
think that's what it was because we still had a relatively new baby at that point. So I was like, you know what? She needs to nurse like every 45 minutes. You can go to these. I'll go to some of them. And so he wound up going to the ones that really got into the confirmation information, all that. So I've been playing catch up. So actually I'm excited to go back through. And then our church also does something called Walking with Purpose.
Oh,
you've heard of this program?
I haven't.
It's women's only. And I think there's like in our church, maybe 300 women come together either Thursday nights or Friday mornings all throughout the school year. And they read through, I'm not sure if it's a Catholic book. It's a Christian writer, but I'm not sure if it's a Catholic writer or not. But these women have gone through, so it's life-changing. And they just said they feel filled up and ready to go back and fill up their families afterwards. And it's an hour and a half on either Thursday night or Friday mornings, and they have childcare. It's like, sign me up. I'm going.
Oh, well, childcare. There you go. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I get to steep back in with a community this fall with both RCIA on Thursday nights and then this Walking with Purpose, which I'm really excited to get to connect with more Catholic women.
Oh yeah, I will tell you, I love connecting with, cradle Catholics. I love talking to them, but I will say I think you always will just feel like somewhat of a special connection with Catholic converts sometimes. Like my RCIA class, the people I went through RCIA with, I'm still friends with like all of them. It was back in Nashville. We now live, in Raleigh, but I still keep in touch with them with everything. And we still talk about, different things because we went through the whole process together. And I'm not sure what is typical for an RCIA class, but I thought it was a big class. There was probably like 30 of us or so.
Oh, wow. That's insane.
Yeah, it was huge. And you think about all their sponsors and then just the whole, so I mean, it was a big group and everyone came from so many different, backgrounds and different reasons. And we had one came from a Mormon family. And it's so funny when I think back, like our first few weeks, like, my gosh, cause I don't know how every RCIA is, but ours kind of started out with just an open question and answer. So basically, what are some things you've always wanted to ask? What are your big misgivings? Like, just go for it. And our poor RCIA, leaders.
They got it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Just peppered with all the big main questions, and it was so funny hearing everyone's different reasons for being there. I only went because I wanted to know what my husband believed or was going to be my husband. We were engaged. And because I had agreed to raise our kids Catholic and I was fine with that. But I felt like, oh, it's going to be weird if, I don't even know what it is my kids believe. So I was just literally going for that. And I was ready to, as I like to say, deconstruct everything, and dismantle all of it with my Sola Scriptura Bible. And
it sounds very, very Scott Hahn-esque. And he goes to Mass and is ready to just be an observer, and he can tell everybody they're wrong.
Yep. And that's what I was ready to do. And it's so funny that you bring that up because the first book that even opened me up to, well, maybe I'm not just here just to learn, was my sponsor suggested, because no one ever pressured me. They're like, oh, that's great. Just come here and learn. And I was like, okay. And I went in secret, by the way. I didn't tell anyone that I was going. I didn't even tell my fiance because I didn't want him to influence me. I didn't want my family to influence me. I literally just wanted to learn on my own and do it. So I went for, I think, a couple months before I ended up even telling Andy I was going. And
you must have been surprised.
Oh my gosh. I think he was like kind of like terrified to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. And I think he just like looked at me like, just don't ruin anything. Just, like, don't be too supportive. Don't be
coming true, but don't say anything.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, because, and he was just absolutely floored that I had been doing this. So it's so funny. And so they had suggested me to read Home Sweet Rome.
Oh.
And it was the first time that I had felt like someone truly understood what it was that I believed right now, at that time, Sola Scriptura and that whole theology. I was like, oh my gosh, he gets it. Like, he gets my point of view, which, unless you have someone who's kind of had that similar background, it's hard to talk sometimes. And I've tried to tell people this, or like, I want to talk to non-denominational. I'm like, well, just know that there may be some gaps that you can't fill just because you just have a different life experience, and that's okay. We all play different roles. And for me, Scott Hahn played a huge role because I felt like he understood exactly what it was that I believed, but yet he still presented everything in that context. He presented the church within that context, which I hadn't found anyone up until that point who could do that for me.
That's
so,
awesome. Yeah. So you didn't have the one thing, but that sounds like that really. So when on, say, the social media or your blog, and people are asking you questions, you said are these mostly cradle Catholics, or are there converts who are coming to you?
Mainly cradle Catholics. I have a lot of converts that like follow me and I've kind of become friends with, but they don't necessarily ask me a lot of questions. Kind of like you, right? It's like that. So I've gotten to know a lot of converts who are like, yes, oh, I feel the same way, or, oh, I get it. But the questions that I get are generally yes from cradle Catholics from various topics.
Yeah. We have something called kayak around here. It's for 20s and 30 something Catholics.
Oh, cool.
It is really cool. It's a really engaged group. And I mean, we had, I think they're doing a picnic this weekend, but we did this walking through, a spiritual retreat center to a shrine of Mary. And we did the rosary as we're walking, and it was just really nice. But that group had to have like 50 people in it.
Nice.
It's really cool it's really cool to see how active some of the young Catholics are in our area. But it was funny because I went to my first outing, and usually it's education based, or they go and do benediction. But then one meeting a month, they do go out and do something fun. So we paint and pottery and drink wine. And
nice.
when I was explaining, I'd only been a Catholic. Like I realized I was in RCI. I think I'd only been to 2 RCI meetings at that point. So it was interesting because it seemed like a lot of most everybody was cradle Catholic.
Yeah.
They were, I think, most curious because they wanted to kind of validate why they still believe what they did. Seeing why somebody would willingly choose this as an adult.
Right. Yeah. And that is what I get a lot too, sometimes of encouragement. They're like, it's nice and refreshing to hear someone who chose this. And here's the truth though. I mean, at some point we all choose. I mean,
yeah,
you make the choice at some point. And so everyone has chosen it. Maybe others haven't, but then they really haven't chosen it. They're not really all there maybe yet. And that's okay. I've also always said that I always like to meet, my goal, particularly with my platforms, is to meet people where they're at. And I mean that literally, figuratively, everything else that goes with that. I wish that, the quote, it's like, be the person you needed when you were younger. And I've always tried to remind myself of that because I love being involved in, like, when you're saying these people, Catholics who are really on fire and so involved. And I love those people and we need those people and I want to encourage them to keep doing what they're doing. But my big call, I feel like, and my heart lies with those that aren't there yet, who have questions, who have doubts, who are concerned, who have valid points. Here's the thing, like people who are not Catholic or have different beliefs, a lot of them have very valid points and are very intelligent people. I think they're missing things, but I get it. And that's okay. I think so many I've talked to been just like terrified to ask questions. Like they're almost terrified to know, that they won't like the answer or something. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, you should ask the questions because I promise you there's an answer.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, that's a very cool persona to kind of cultivate online because it's very needed now instead of just somebody being preached at.
Yes.
Or condemned for not feeling a certain way, or you're not all there if you're not feeling whatever it is. Yeah, that's awesome.
And it's taken a long time to get to where I'm at because there's some people within the church that are sometimes, this is not maybe the right way to say, but like can be a little overly righteous sometimes. Mm-hmm. And that stuff used to terrify me when I was younger. It was those people that turned me away from. One of the reasons I became agnostic was because of individuals like that. I think they all mean very well, but they come across not in the best way. And particularly for young Catholics who, like, I've tried to tell people this, and like, I promise you, the majority of young Catholics are having those questions. They're asking themselves, and if you're not answering it for them, someone else is. So you might as well just address it. Like, don't be afraid to talk theology. Don't be afraid to talk apologetics. I think you should. And I think they should be equipped with that because that is what is, at least for me, given me the confidence that, people ask me like, how are you so confident to talk online and tell people you're Catholic? I used to not be that way, but I've said this 1,000 times. And if you follow me, you know this. I say it, knowledge is so much power. It is so much power. There is nothing someone can say that will threaten what I believe, because I know thoroughly what it is that I believe, and as we've talked about, why I believe it. And I think the more people you equip with that, the more confident Catholics that you will get, because they're going to have true understanding. And, you know, there's so many things I can go into more, but
I think the church understands that they de-emphasized apologetics after Vatican II, and that was an issue now, because you have people who they were going based on feeling. They wanted people to have the feels at Mass, which is fine. You maybe will sometimes, but that's not the point. The point isn't to feel something; it's a commitment.
No. Well,
and now it seems like, especially with I love the Catholicism series with Bishop Barron.
Yes.
And that is, you know, he says, you know, you have to bring it back to apologetics. We need to give people, it's not even non-denominations that we're, you know, I don't want to say fighting against, but I guess it's the secularism.
Oh yeah.
And they're the ones
culture.
That feel like, they've been telling us that, you know, I used to be one of those people. Like you faith people, that must be nice for you, but you're an idiot.
Oh yeah.
I've got facts on my side. That faith is factual.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yes. So these gets me fired up talking about this, but yes, it's the culture in general. 110%. We live in a world, in a society that is, first of all, information overload. Okay. People are asking questions they've never asked before, and they're getting answers in all these different places. Everyone's sharing their opinions. They're showing their facts. That here's a study here. Here's a study here. You know, you don't have to go to a library to look up a quote unquote, you know, article or study that proves your point. So it makes it sometimes hard to also discern truth, right? And what makes sense. And so who also, I think, controls a lot of, I don't want to say controls, but is very present on all the social media, is secular culture, right? They are it's their baby that they have blossomed into what it is, which is just sometimes extremely chaotic. And this is why my goal too is to have a presence that's different than that. There's always this idea, right, especially with science, that the idea that religion has always been used as just an excuse to explain the unexplainable. And that's just not true. That may have been true at some point, or that's how it may have been viewed at some point. That's not what it is. That's not what Catholicism is. It hasn't just been this way to explain the unexplainable. So now that we have science that's explaining the quote unquote unexplainable, therefore we've pushed God out, because God's no longer needed, because we can explain it all ourselves. And in fact, I think it's the complete opposite. The fact that it is all explainable is more evidence for a greater creator than anything else. But that's also getting off on tangents. But
this sounds really, it would have been fun to have you in the car for the 14-hour road trip. Actually 16 hours, excuse me. Maybe not the whole time, because I think you would have run out of the car screaming. But this would have been great, because this is all the stuff that we were talking about when the kids were asleep. So
love it.
I know, it was good.
Oh, there's so much, and so there's all these different topics, right? And so all of it deserves attention, you know, but depending on where you're at. And again, I just know in my heart of hearts that young people, I think every adult, I think, can attest that they question things. You know, at some point they had these big questions, and they're good questions. I think we like to think that, you know, 14 and 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 17, 18-year-olds, that they, you know, let's just feed them good stuff and they'll be good. Let's give them a little more credit than that. They're intelligent. They're smart. They're being exposed to things all over the place, to news, to, you know, depending on what college they go to. I went to an extremely liberal college, and I'm grateful for it now, because I get it. And I get a lot of those arguments, and you have some good points. Again, I think you're missing things, but they're having those questions, and you should allow them to have those questions. Ask the questions. I say all the time on my platforms, you know, direct message me, talk to me. Like, seriously, I do. And I can't tell you how many hours a week probably just having one-on-one conversations with so many people who have questions. And of course, I'm kind of this, you know, anonymous social media person. They've decided to ask these questions to. And I don't go into too deep, and I eventually kind of turn them like, you can talk to someone else, but I don't know if there's someone else for them to talk to who would answer it. So I've tried to somewhat become that platform in some ways, without overstepping as well too.
That's very cool. And you never know, out of any of the people that you talk to, if you get one person to even start thinking with their heads, not just what their feelings, then you've done something really, you've done a great service.
Yes. And I hope so. And again, if anyone's listening who I've had these conversations with, probably like, oh my gosh, yes, she talks a lot. Because I don't think anyone actually really expects me to have like these full-on conversations with them, but I do. And then I go on kind of like I do here. And I'm like, oh, and I can talk about this. I can tell you all about this. Like, here, let me give you 4 books.
Here's a reading list. Check in with me.
Let me know if you want to talk more about it. I'd love to.
You can start an online book group. I'm all for you.
Oh, for real. It would basically, I'd probably label it like Scott Hahn as my spirit animal or something like that.
Have you ever seen his videos from Franciscan University?
I haven't actually.
Okay.
I've only seen a few different speeches. Like everything else I've just read, honestly, of his.
Oh man, yeah. So he, I can't think of what it's called right now. It's one of these things. So my husband, if you let him turn on the TV, it is like 45 minutes of him going through the same stuff and saying, oh, not this, well, yeah, no, this. So thankfully, I'm actually really grateful for it. But when he wants to watch something, it's Mother Angelica. Or this Franciscan University. Franciscan Presents, maybe is what it's called. But it's Scott Hahn is a regular, one of the vice presidents of the college and a professor, and then they have a guest. Gotcha. So it's like a once a week thing. What I'll do is I'll put it in the show notes. I'll put a link in the show notes so that everybody else can get it. And I'll get the link over to you too, because it's it's just so interesting, and you get to hear all these really cool different perspectives from secular Catholic, or I should say lay Catholic writers, or priests who've written a bunch or whatever it is, and it's such an interesting mix. Plus, then you get to hear Scott.
Oh, I love that.
It's awesome, and it's not structured like a talk is. It's just a conversation, which is cool.
Yeah.
Well, Leah,
yes,
come back and we can talk about any of these things more. Another time, because this has been great. As I'm stuttering, this has been great.
Oh yeah. Oh, you'll probably have to put blinders on me and be like, Leah, we're talking about this one subject this time.
No,
okay.
We had 2 that we wanted to talk about, and I think we covered it.
Good.
Evangelization and conversion.
True. So, we did talk about them.
So let's on the sign off here. You are getting into Thomas Aquinas again. What do you have any ideas on top of that? Or are you reading that solely right now?
Oh, let's see what else I'm reading. I'm also reading The Church Fathers by Pope Benedict. Nice. And I'm reading one other. I'm really bad. I have reading ADD. But I'm reading another. They're all like theological. I just started this next one. That's why I can't remember it. But
well, then when you remember what it is, you can come back and talk to me about it. But I don't think people give Pope Benedict enough credit. He's a really intelligent man who really did a lot for Catholic apologetics.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. There's so many books. I can't.
No, you really a lifetime of reading now, even if you do have reading ADD.
Oh, my goal is I'm going to be like Belle from Beauty and the Beast with just a theological library.
That sounds awesome.
Yes.
Invite me over when you have that.
I will. I'm going to have the rolling ladder and everything.
And a song. You have to do a song on.
I will have a song.
Okay. So thank you, Leah. What I'm going to do, everybody who's listening, I'll put Leah's social media accounts in the show notes so that you can link right out to that. And Leah, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Yes, it was. Thank you for having me.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening. I'll talk next time.
Yes. Bye.
Don't forget to head over to thecatholicmama.com to get your free copy of How to Talk to Your Kids About God. This handy little ebook will teach you how to broach the topic of God with your children, or how to respond to your kids when they want to talk about God, as well as give you answers to 7 of the trickiest questions about the faith that Christian parents face. You'll love the easy-to-understand grown-up answers, the pared down but not talked down answers you can share with your kids, plus recommended resources if you'd like to deepen your understanding of the topic. Get yours free at thecatholicmama.com.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.